Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk a little bit about The Eternal Dream. Eternal Dream Christmas. You can get this book through January 2025 only, and then it disappears forever. It has 10 of the Eternal Dream books in it. Don't worry, the books aren't disappearing. You can still buy them separately, but it also includes The Bright Children, which has never before been published in a book. What I wanted to talk about today is a little bit of the lore of my fantasy universe and how the timeline works. For people who've been digging into it, they find that there's stories that take place over very different and within very different periods of time where the world appears to be quite different and there's different players involved, and even magic and things like that seem to work a little bit differently than they do in other periods. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, and about how I really started writing this. So the origins of this book actually lie in a different book, which is not even in the collection because I just didn't have enough room, and that's this one right here, City of Silver, Moonsong. So this was something that I wrote over 10 years ago at this point, began it, and I didn't publish it for a long time because it wasn't good. It was one of my early books, and it just wasn't good. I needed more experience. I needed more practice, and then I could go back, edit it, and make it good. Now it's one of my most popular books is City of Silver, and the Moonsong series is indeed become one of my more popular series. It's not in this book because it takes place in the latest time period, and so what I imagined was kind of a fantasy world where it was closer to a modern mindset where the magic is in the past and magic isn't there, and magic, if anybody's doing magic, it's got to be like something evil, right? What I wanted was a later period. This takes place roughly in terms of like its technological level in the Age of Sail, and the more medieval type of stuff is in the distant past, like after several cataclysms and stuff in a dark age, we are built back up to where we are here. That's the last period, what I call like the mundane period, or the mundane age. We can think of it as like the age of technology, right? But we have some other periods here as well. Bright Children takes place in the first one, which is what I call the mythic period. So the myths are hinted at, and sometimes they're discussed, sometimes they're read or they're told in some of the other books in fragments, but that's the earliest period, is the mythic age, where the gods are present, they're doing things, they're interacting with each other, they're causing large changes in the world with big consequences. The Bright Children actually takes place in a period where like the goddess of sight has been murdered, so there's no sun and so that's before she comes back, before like she's reborn. So how are you surviving in that world? That's what that one focuses on, which is kind of unique. A world of darkness, and without magic, you'd be dead, right? So without the divine light that's within you, you'll be dead. The next period, what I call Eternal Dream Legends, that's the legendary period or the heroic period. It's roughly approximates something like the Iliad and the Odyssey. We're still in a mythological mode, but we're not dealing with like the creation of the world or creation of the sun, right? Creation myths are distant past at that point. Not so distant past, but it's really like the world is created and exists sort of as we know it. Though there's a lot of magic. There's elves. There's more ancient more ancient races, and then there's the gods are still kind of involved in human affairs to a certain extent, just like they are in the Iliad and the Odyssey. So those are those books. The only exception to that is the Wasting Desert, which really takes place after Needle Ash, but it's in that series because it's kind of a companion book. So that's the legendary period, and then what I call the fantasy period, or the historical period. It's the main sequence of the books that are just labeled Eternal Dream, number 1, number 2, and number 3 will be King Leper, which will be coming out in 2025. We're getting that going. Oh, by the way, if you join my mailing list, deviouspress.com/list, you get a free ebook of Demon Ex Machina. That's a sci-fi horror. That's a horror kind of book, so that's something different. And patrons this month also get Afterglow Generation Y. That's the free book for people who join me on Patreon. And actually, if you would join me on Patreon in the summer, you would have already had Eternal Dream Book 3 available to you, which is King Leper. So anyway, those are the four kind of historical areas, or the four different time periods that the lore takes place in. The mythic mode, and then the legendary mode, which is still kind of in the mythic mode, but closer to the modern stuff. And then the historical or fantasy, the main sequence stuff. Those are the longest books, by the way. And then the Moonsong series, which is in the mundane period, the period kind of post magic. And as we get a few more of those books released, so the first trilogy is out, which concluded with Shadow and Smoke. Then we're going to kind of dig into some more mythology and stuff in the next couple volumes that come out after that, which I'm working on getting those 3 out. The reason people ask, say, hey, why isn't Bright Children its own book yet? And the reason is because I really wanted to release it closer to the next 2 books in that series so that it'll make like a complete set of those books, and you'll get like a whole big arc, kind of concluding a big mythological conflict in those books. That's really what I wanted to do with them, and so that's why that one hasn't been released, but it will. We'll get there with it. Some interesting things to think about with a couple of these books. So the Bright Children I mentioned is in the mythic period, and it's in a more mythic mode with monsters and gods. Crown of Sight is a big idea for that one was I wanted to write an epic fantasy that's just the last battle and see how that did. And so that's what it is. There's a lot of story that comes before that, but what we're really seeing is the conclusion of a conflict in a giant siege and how that wraps up. And it also produces an important couple of magical artifacts which will be relevant in King Leper when that comes out. Same thing with Al Shafalda. There is also involving a relic that was created in Crown of Sight, which has a very profound impact in this book. This is a tragedy dealing with like an elven king falling for a mortal woman and the disastrous consequences of that. Sorcerer's Blood I wrote live on the air, and that's a fun one. And that's more of just an adventure story told in the first person, Garamesh and the Farmer. This is a fairy tale. This is a much earlier book that I've released, and I actually wrote it within one of the Moonsong books with a character telling this story to another one, but I just made it its own standalone book because I really like the story and other people seem to like it too. Wasting Desert, it uses a couple of characters from both Water of Awakening and Needle Ash, but they are on their own adventure after the events of Needle Ash. So Water of Awakening is the main sequence book. I have it over here if you want to see the cover, or you could just buy this. $9.99, $10 for 10 books. That's a pretty good deal if you're interested in that. So Water of Awakening, this is our first sort of main sequence book. The other one is Needle Ash, and the third one will be King Leper. As we go through the time periods, what we get is a transition from people having full access to like magic and creation magic in particular, to people relying entirely on technology and their know-how in order to operate in the world. So we have a dissolving of magic, and that's an important point that you get in Water of Awakening, is that the magic in the world is kind of drying up. And by the time we get to Moonsong, I have these kind of set as dominions, so based on what empire is powerful. So the first dominion is Crown of Sight and Al Shafalda, and then fourth dominion much later are these ones, and then sixth dominion is the Moonsong book. So we've had several like kind of cataclysmic and downfalls of empires and things like that have happened, which I could write. I could also write in those periods as well. In fact, I have stories planned for at least one of those that maybe I'll get to before I die. Maybe I won't. We'll see. I write as much as I can in these things. So yeah, here things are very magical. The intense level of magic that everybody had in Bright Children is still largely present. And by the time we get to Water of Awakening, magic has become rare. Mages are fairly rare, but they're not missing, right? They're present, used as weapons in war, and magic is still around. There's talking creatures and things like that are very fantastical and strange. By the time you get to Moonsong, no one has magic, and one of the kind of overarching conflicts is who has that? Is it, what is that from, and what does that mean for like possibly the end of the world, or how like a big change that might happen to the world where things might come back from how they were. There's this idea of the world becoming more mundane. They often use this word mundane in the books, where mundane kind of just means physical, non-magical, dead, right? So the earth becomes more mundane as the people in it, the dreamers, make the world into what it is. The world is more fluid in the earlier periods. In the mythic periods, the world is more easily remade, and by the time you get to the end, the world is static, right? It's kind of dead. It can't be changed. The landscape can't be changed. People can't be changed. Things kind of get set as they are, which is a state that can't last forever. It's an equilibrium that has to go back the other way. And so the chance for magic to come back is the chance for things that are mundane but permanent to get remade into things that are new and interesting. Magic is derived basically from divine origin in my books. It's not like a magic system like Sanderson or something like that. It's really about accessing the divine spark to make something real by understanding the concept of what it is. That, there's you have a concept of fire. What is fire? Well, you're going to make fire directly, rather than I'm rubbing two sticks to create friction, which generates heat, which ignites the wood, which is a mundane reaction. We're just directly making fire. We're directly making heat. We can directly make heartbreak. We can directly make sight. We can remove sight. We can affect those things in a direct fashion. We can directly do these things. Fire being probably the most common one because it's really powerful, but you can make other things directly as well. And so that's the power of the mages that they have in this. It's not so much like a Sandersonian system. When I first came out with these books, that was a kind of a complaint I got. Is like, oh, the magic system is like, what magic system, dude? Like, you don't have to have a magic system in fantasy. I grew up reading Tolkien and Moorcock and Robert E. Howard, and they didn't have magic systems. There might have been magic talismans. Sorcery, you pray to the gods, and the water gods come do something. But it's not like, oh, you have to suck up the energy out of these crystals, and then you have to burn these two combinations of metals to do that. Like Sanderson's magic systems, people like them a lot, but that's not like classic fantasy, which is more what inspired me and more of what this is. It's more in the classic mode, though I do think I have my own flavor for how I do things. So I do hope you will check it out and get this mammoth volume before the end of 2025. Leave me your thoughts down below. I get a lot of those questions a lot. I've answered some of them. I probably haven't answered all of them. If you're wondering where the origin of the races, I'll add this one in because people ask about this. There's some different races. There's the Dryson, there's like the humans, there's the elves. It really has to do with descent from the Golden Man to like the Iron Man. So, the Golden Man are the bright children. Those are the first beings. The gods basically are perfect in a sense. And through the fall of the gods, the people also fall. They become more mortal, right? So they grow tired of the earth and have to do what they call the long sleep, which is they go to they basically disappear back into the eternal dream, into the nether realm, and they can reappear body and soul like later on. It's a sleep. It's a sleep for them, but they have to do it because the world becomes too exhausting from its imperfection through its fall. As the descent happens, and this is already beginning in the Bright Children, you have people that are less magical, the dim men, and those are people, so their descendants become human beings. We have access to the divine spark, but we can't very easily make things directly. Rather, we have to combine things, use alchemy or, our mundane chemistry and things like that in order to make things real. Elven blood kind of infuses people and gives them, gives people sometimes the ability to use magic, but that basically becomes almost completely died out by the time we get to the mundane period, by the time you get to Moonsong, where it's not there. And the elves are gone too. They've disappeared. They've either, gone to sleep and they've disappeared from the earth, or they've gone into seclusion in hidden realms that no one can access, because you need magic to access them. If you're in a world of mundane people who have no magic, you can never access them. They're hidden forever. They're gone, right? And what really inspired this, besides like, obviously mythological inspirations with the Golden Man, but this idea that as we become more modern, we lose magic. That magic existed in the past. Fairies were real, and now they're not because we can't get to the fairies anymore. The fairy world has been cut off by our technology. That was an idea that really started to take root in my mind over 10 years ago for how the setting would progress, and that's kind of how it works. If you're thinking about the gods, there's several different generations of gods that are worshipped at different people. The nature of the worship of the gods varies by region and by people and by time. So you find some of that stuff in the books. There's a lot more religion stuff in the third book that has to do with rites and things towards the gods, and who exactly they are and what they do. All that stuff is hidden in the books. What you will find is that there's often an evocation of a supreme god, the dreamer, the being from which all the concepts flow and from which the first children were born. And where is he and what's he doing? There's this idea he's kind of withdrawn from the world. That is, his life is in the world, and he's not really he's active in it, but it's not, as a supreme god, he's not touchable anymore, right? You can't directly access him because of this decay of magic. You lose the divine light. You lose your ability to know God better, right? Just as kind of like through the fall, you lose the image and likeness of God. It's the same idea in this book. So those are a lot of the things that influence that, and that's how the time periods are arranged roughly with my work. And of course, because I'm creative, I can change that if I want to, or add something in, or do something new and different. I'm writing another one of the books in this sequence live every Friday, so you can always check that out. You can join my Patreon and get a free book. This month's is Afterglow Generation Y. It's a literary collection. It doesn't have any Eternal Dream books. And this one, which you get for joining my mailing list, dbspress.com/list, that one is just a horror book. So hopefully you'll enjoy that if you join those. And I'll see you all next time. Have a great, great day. And of course, leave me any of your comments or questions down below, and I'll either address them or maybe think about them in a new video. The main purpose of my setting is not to be all about the setting, but to provide a place for adventures to happen. That is, for fun stories to be written. And that's my attitude towards it, rather than looking at it as some sort of grand little world building exercise. It's a setting for fun things to happen in, not something that is it needs to be intensely designed all on its own for its own sake, though I do design it so that these things are kind of coherent and the themes that are existing in my mind are present in these different ideas. So anyway, that's it. I'll see you all next time. Have a great, great day.